The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and Corporal Marin Holt stepped onto the orbital station known as Crucible Prime. The air tasted different here, filtered, recycled, and carrying a faint metallic bite that told her the life support systems were calibrated for species much larger than her. She adjusted the strap of her single duffel bag on her shoulder and followed the glowing floor lights toward the reception hall. Crucible Prime was the most respected military training academy in the Galactic Coalition. For over 300 years, it had shaped the finest warriors from the galaxy's most powerful species. The Rithari, 8-foot reptilian predators with 4 arms and venomous claws, had founded it. The Valdrathi, wolf-like pack hunters who could see in complete darkness using echolocation, had helped design its combat programs. The Kessna, insectoid ambush predators with razor-sharp limbs and reaction speeds that made lightning look slow, had written half the tactical curriculum. Every species that trained here was, by any biological measure, a born killer. And then there was Marin, 5'6", brown hair tied back in a simple knot, no claws, no venom, no natural armor. She weighed about 60 kilograms, which was roughly the same as one of Cirith's legs. The reception hall was enormous, built to accommodate species that stood 3 meters tall. Marin felt like a child walking through a cathedral. A young Rithari officer met her at the entrance. He looked down at her, way down, and his vertical pupils narrowed as he processed what he was seeing. "Corporal Holt?" he asked, as if hoping he had the wrong person. "That's me," she said. He led her through corridors wide enough to drive a truck through. Other cadets and officers passed them, and every single one stared. A pair of Valdrathi cadets stopped mid-conversation to watch her walk by. One of them, a tall female with silver fur, leaned toward her companion and said something in a low growl. They both made a sound that Marin recognized as laughter. She didn't react, she just kept walking. The briefing room was already full when she arrived. 40 Predator cadets sat in tiered rows, their bodies a gallery of evolution's most effective killing designs. Armored scales, compound eyes, muscles built for explosive speed, teeth designed to crack bone. The room hummed with quiet conversation that died the moment Marin walked in. Warchief Instructor Draken Vel stood at the front. He was the largest Rithari Marin had ever seen, nearly 9 feet tall, his scales a deep emerald green, scarred from decades of combat. His 4 arms were folded across his massive chest, and his golden eyes tracked Marin as she crossed the room with an expression that sat somewhere between curiosity and pity. "Cadets," Draken said, his deep voice filling the space without effort. "This is Corporal Marin Holt of the Human Coalition Forces. She has been assigned to our program as part of the Cultural Exchange Initiative. She will be observing our training methods and offering perspective." The way he said perspective made it clear what he thought of the arrangement. A ripple of amusement passed through the cadets. In the front row, a young Rithari with bright amber scales and the confident posture of someone who had never lost a fight leaned back and studied Marin with open interest. This was Cirith, Draken's best student, the top-ranked cadet in the Predator program. He tilted his head sideways, a Rithari gesture of assessment, and his lips pulled back slightly to reveal rows of serrated teeth. "She's small," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Marin looked at him. She didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't react at all. She just looked, the way someone might look at a photograph they were memorizing. A Valdrathi cadet in the 3rd row, the silver-furred female from the corridor, leaned forward and inhaled deeply through her wide nostrils. Her ears rotated toward Marin, mapping her with sound and scent simultaneously. Then she announced, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "She smells like prey." The room erupted in low, rumbling laughter. Even some of the instructors along the wall couldn't hide their amusement. Marin let the laughter run its course. When it faded, she simply said, "Nice to meet everyone," and took a seat at the end of the front row. The briefing continued. Draken outlined the training schedule for the next quarter: advanced combat techniques, hunting simulations, interspecies tactical exercises. Marin listened carefully, her eyes moving from the holographic displays to the cadets and back. She watched how they sat, how they shifted their weight, how they reacted to different topics. She watched which ones were confident and which ones were performing confidence. She watched their hands, their feet, their breathing patterns. Nobody noticed her watching. Why would they? She was just the small human sitting quietly in the corner. After the briefing, Draken asked her to stay behind. When the room emptied, he stood over her like a mountain over a valley and spoke plainly. "I will be honest with you, Corporal. I oppose this assignment. This academy trains predators, warriors from species that evolved to hunt, to kill, to dominate. Humans are classified as persistence-endurance species. You are not predators. You do not belong in this program." Marin looked up at him. She had to tilt her head back considerably. "I understand your concern, Warchief Instructor," she said politely. "I have arranged an administrative role for you," Draken continued. "You can observe from the control room, write your reports, and return to your people with whatever cultural insights you need. There is no shame in it." "That's very kind," Marin said, "but I'd prefer to participate in the combat evaluations." Draken's forearms unfolded slowly. "Participate?" "Yes, sir. When is the first one?" For a long moment, Draken simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, not respect, not yet, but perhaps the faintest ghost of surprise that this small, soft creature was not behaving the way small, soft creatures were supposed to behave. "You are welcome to observe the combat evaluations," he said carefully, "from the gallery." Marin nodded. "Thank you, sir." She turned and walked out. Her footsteps were quiet against the metal floor, not the heavy, confident strikes of a predator, but something else. Something Draken couldn't quite name. Light, deliberate, the footsteps of something that had learned, a very long time ago, to move without being heard. That night, alone in her quarters, which were comically oversized, built for someone twice her height, Marin sat cross-legged on the floor and opened her tablet. She pulled up the Academy's official combat rulebook, a document so dense and detailed that most cadets never read past the first chapter. Marin read the whole thing. She read it slowly, carefully, the way a surgeon reads a scan before an operation. Her fingers scrolled through sections on weapon classifications, challenge protocols, interspecies sparring regulations, and liability waivers. Halfway through, she stopped. Her finger hovered over a single paragraph buried deep in the appendix. Article 7 of the Coalition Training Accord. She read it once, then again, then a third time. A small smile crossed her face, the first real one since she had arrived. It was not the smile of someone who found something funny. It was the smile of someone who had just found exactly what they were looking for. She highlighted the passage, closed the tablet, and lay back on the oversized bed, staring at the ceiling. "There it is," she whispered to the empty room. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep almost instantly, the deep, efficient sleep of someone who had learned long ago to rest when rest was available, because you never knew when the next chance would come. Her heart rate settled to a steady 58 beats per minute. Her breathing became slow and even. Outside her window, the stars of the galaxy turned slowly in the dark. Somewhere on the station, 40 predator cadets slept the satisfied sleep of apex species who had never known what it meant to be hunted. Marin Holt slept differently. She slept the way humans had always slept, lightly, efficiently, with some ancient part of her brain still listening for the sound of something with claws moving in the dark. The training arena was a massive oval carved into the heart of Crucible Prime. Its floor was covered in a rubberized compound designed to absorb the impact of bodies weighing 300 kilograms or more. Observation galleries lined the upper walls, separated from the fighting floor by transparent barriers rated to withstand a direct charge from a full-grown Rithari. The air inside carried the faint copper scent of old blood that no amount of cleaning could fully remove. Marin sat in the gallery the next morning, alone in a row built for giants, her feet dangling above the floor. Below her, the Predator cadets ran their daily combat drills, and she watched every second of it with the quiet focus of someone studying a language she intended to speak fluently. The drills were impressive. There was no other word for it. The Rithari cadets moved with terrifying speed for their size, their forearms working in coordinated patterns that could strike from angles most species couldn't even track. Their venomous claws left faint trails of mist in the air as they slashed and grabbed. Two of them sparred in the center of the arena, and the sound of their bodies colliding was like cars crashing. The Valdrathi worked in pairs, as their species always did. They communicated through clicks and ultrasonic pulses that were invisible to most ears, coordinating their attacks with a precision that bordered on telepathic. One would drive the target forward while the other circled behind. Their movements were fluid, predatory, and beautiful in a way that made the stomach tighten. But it was the Kessna that held Marin's attention longest. The insectoid cadets fought differently from everyone else. They waited. They stood perfectly still, their compound eyes processing the arena in 360 degrees, and then they moved explosive bursts of speed that turned them into blurs. One Kessna cadet hit her sparring partner so hard that the Rithari she was fighting slid 3 meters across the floor. The instructors nodded in approval. The Kessna returned to stillness, her razor limbs folding back against her body like weapons being sheathed. Marin watched the Kessna's legs. Specifically, she watched the small muscles at the base of the rear limbs, the ones that tensed a fraction of a second before the explosive movement began. A fraction of a second was nothing to most species. To a human eye trained in combat reading, it was a billboard. She watched Sirith fight 3 opponents simultaneously and win in under 20 seconds. He was fast, fluid, and creative, the best cadet in the program by a visible margin. But Marin noticed something about him that perhaps no one else in the room would have caught. When he finished a fight, when he stood over his defeated opponents, his weight always settled onto his right rear leg. His left carried a micro-hesitation, so small that even the Academy's sensors probably missed it. An old injury maybe, or a habit, either way it was a door. Marin cataloged it alongside everything else and said nothing. After the session ended, she made her way down to the arena level. Cadets filed past her, towering over her like trees over a shrub. Some glanced at her with amusement. Others didn't look at all. She was furniture to them, something small and harmless that occupied space without consequence. She found Draken reviewing performance data on a holographic display near the weapon racks. He saw her approaching and his expression tightened slightly, the way someone's face tightens when they see a problem they hoped had gone away. "Warchief Instructor," Marin said, "I'd like to formally invoke Article 7 of the Coalition Training Accord." The holographic display flickered as Draken's lower left hand accidentally pressed a button. He turned to face her fully, all 4 arms dropping to his sides. "What did you say?" "Article 7, Marin repeated calmly. "Any visiting instructor may issue an open challenge to demonstrate their species' combat doctrine, provided they use only species-appropriate or non-lethal equipment. The host academy is required to provide opponents and a fair venue." Draken stared at her for a long time. "I know what Article 7 says, Corporal. It has existed for 2 centuries. No one has ever invoked it. I'm invoking it now. You understand what this means. You would be fighting my cadets, in the arena, in live combat conditions." "Yes, sir. My cadets are apex predators, Corporal. Every single one of them could kill you without using a weapon." Marin held his gaze. "That's what makes it a good demonstration, sir." Draken's jaw worked silently for a moment. She could see the calculations running behind his golden eyes, the political implications, the liability concerns, the sheer absurdity of what she was asking. But Article 7 was clear. She had the right. He could not refuse without violating coalition training law. The word spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By evening, every cadet, instructor, and support staff member on the station knew that the human had challenged the Predator cadets to open combat. The reactions ranged from disbelief to genuine excitement. This was entertainment. This was a small, clawless, fangless creature walking into a room full of killing machines and asking for a fight. Cirith volunteered immediately. He didn't even wait to be asked. He walked into Draken's office, stood at attention, and said he wanted in. 11 other cadets joined him within the hour, 3 more Rithari, 4 Valdrathi, 2 Kessna, and 2 cadets from species Marin had not yet studied in detail. 12 predators, all top-ranked, all eager to show the galaxy what happened when prey forgot its place. The combat was scheduled for the following afternoon. Draken, unable to prevent it, did what he could. He arranged a full medical team, trauma pods, and emergency stasis fields around the arena. He placed them on Marin's side of the floor. His meaning was clear. The morning of the fight, Marin went through the weapon selection ceremony. It was a formal tradition at the academy. The challenger chose from a display of approved non-lethal training equipment, while the defending cadets retained their natural weapons, adjusted to sublethal levels. The armory room was packed with observers as Marin walked along the display wall. There were training blades, weighted staffs, shock batons, compression nets, sensory disruptors, impact shields, and a dozen other tools designed to give non-predator species a fighting chance against natural-born killers. Some of them were sophisticated pieces of technology. Any one of them would have been a reasonable choice. Marin picked up a short rubber baton. It was about 40 centimeters long, slightly flexible, weighted at one end. It was the simplest thing on the wall, a stick, essentially, covered in impact-absorbing material. It was designed for basic blocking drills. Nobody had ever used one in actual combat. The armorer, a scarred Valdrathi with one missing ear, looked at the baton and then looked at Marin. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it. You don't want armor. We have adaptive plating that could absorb at least 1 or 2 direct hits from a Rithari." "No, thank you. A shield, a secondary weapon, anything." Marin turned the baton over in her hand, feeling its weight and balance. She gave it a small, experimental flick. The rubber tip cut through the air with a soft whistle. "Just this," she said. The room went quiet. The cadets who had been whispering and joking stopped. The instructors along the wall exchanged glances. Something had shifted in the room, and it took a moment for anyone to identify what it was. It was Marin's voice. The polite, agreeable tone she had carried since arriving was gone. In its place was something flat and steady, the voice of someone who had already made every decision they needed to make and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Cirith, standing with his 11 teammates near the arena entrance, watched Marin walk past them toward the combat floor. She moved differently now. The careful, unobtrusive steps were gone. She walked with a loose, rolling gait, her shoulders dropping, her center of gravity settling low. She rotated her neck slowly, then her wrists, then rolled each shoulder with a series of small pops. Draken stood in the instructor's gallery above and watched her prepare. He had spent 40 years studying combat. He had trained thousands of cadets from dozens of predator species. He had seen every fighting stance, every pre-combat ritual, every display of aggression and dominance the galaxy had to offer. He had never seen anything like what Marin Holt was doing. She wasn't displaying. She wasn't posturing. She was dismantling something invisible, peeling away layers of politeness, patience, and restraint, like someone removing a disguise they had been wearing so long it had become a second skin. What emerged underneath was quiet, compact, and very still. Draken felt something stir in the pit of his stomach. It was unfamiliar and unwelcome, and it took him several seconds to recognize what it was. It was unease. Not fear, not yet, but the ancient, instinctive recognition that something in front of him was not what it appeared to be, that the small, soft creature holding a rubber stick was not prey, had perhaps never been prey, and that every assumption the Academy had made about her species was about to be tested in the most public and painful way possible. He gripped the railing with all four hands and said nothing. Below, the arena lights brightened to full combat intensity. Marin Holt stood alone on the floor, 12 predators arranged before her, and waited for the signal with the patience of something that had been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. The arena's biometric display hung in the air above the combat floor like a scoreboard at a sporting event. It tracked the vital signs of every fighter in real time: heart rate, respiration, adrenaline levels, muscle tension. The gallery was packed beyond capacity. Word had reached beyond the Academy, and several coalition diplomats had found reasons to be on Crucible Prime that afternoon. They sat in the upper tiers alongside instructors, cadets, and support staff, all watching the floor below with the hungry attention of people who knew they were about to see something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. The 12 Predator cadets entered from the east gate. They moved with the easy confidence of species that sat at the top of their respective food chains. Cirith led them, his amber scales catching the arena lights as he rolled his massive shoulders and flexed all four arms. Behind him came 3 more Rithari, each one a wall of muscle and venom. The 4 Valdrathi fanned out to the flanks, their silver and gray fur bristling, their ultrasonic clicks painting the arena in sound. The 2 Kessna took positions near the obstacles, low walls and pillars scattered across the floor, their compound eyes already scanning every angle. The last 2 cadets, a pair of Grenath, tall, thin, 6-limbed species with whip-fast reflexes and skin that could harden to stone on impact, completed the formation. 12 predators, 12 evolutionary masterpieces of violence. They arranged themselves in a loose hunting crescent without being told, instinct taking over, millions of years of predatory evolution writing their positions for them. The west gate opened, and Marin Holt walked in. The contrast was almost comical. She stood in the center of the arena floor in her standard-issue training clothes, fitted gray fabric that left her arms and legs free. No armor, no helmet, no protection of any kind. In her right hand, she held the rubber baton, loose and easy, like someone carrying an umbrella on a cloudy day. The biometric display lit up with 13 sets of vital signs. 12 of them showed elevated heart rates, surging adrenaline, and the kind of heightened physiological arousal that predator species experienced before a kill. Cirith's heart was beating at 142 beats per minute. The Kessna cadets were running at 160. Marin's heart rate read 62. A murmur passed through the gallery. 62 was a resting heart rate. She wasn't just calm, her body hadn't even registered that she was in danger. Either she was too stupid to understand what was about to happen, or she was something else entirely. The arena master, a veteran Rithari with a voice like grinding stone, announced the terms. Open combat, non-lethal conclusion. The challenge would end when one side was unable to continue. He asked both sides if they were ready. The 12 cadets responded with a unified growl that vibrated the floor. Marin gave a small nod. The signal sounded, a deep, resonant tone that filled the arena and triggered something old in every brain present. Cirith surged forward. He was the fastest, the best, and he intended to end this quickly, almost as a mercy. The other 11 cadets moved with him, the formation tightening into a closing net designed to overwhelm from every direction. Marin did not retreat. She did not freeze. She did not raise the baton defensively. She ran straight at them. The gallery went silent. She sprinted directly toward the gap between the first Rithari and the leftmost Valdrathi, a gap that existed for exactly 1.5 seconds before the formation closed. She hit that gap at full speed, and what happened next would be analyzed by military theorists across the coalition for decades. She dropped low, impossibly low, her body folding under the Rithari's four-armed grab like water passing through fingers, and drove the weighted end of the baton into the nerve cluster behind his lower right knee. It was a spot roughly the size of a coin, buried under 3 centimeters of armored scale, and she hit it with the precision of a surgeon placing a scalpel. The Rithari's leg buckled instantly. His brain sent the command to stand, but the nerve pathway was scrambled. He went down hard, 4 arms grabbing at nothing, confusion flooding his face before he even understood what had happened. 1 down, 1.5 seconds elapsed. Marin was already moving. She didn't pause, didn't look back, didn't waste a single motion confirming what she already knew. She pivoted off her left foot and drove toward the 2 Valdrathi on the flank. They saw her coming and reacted with pack-hunter coordination, one lunging high, one sweeping low, their bodies forming a pincer that had killed prey on a dozen worlds. Marin opened her mouth and screamed. It wasn't a battle cry. It wasn't rage. It was a short, sharp, precisely modulated burst of sound at a frequency she had calculated the night before using the Academy's own database on Valdrathi biology. Their echolocation worked by processing reflected sound waves with extreme sensitivity. A sudden, discordant noise at close range was like a flashbang to their senses. Both Valdrathi flinched. Their coordination shattered for half a second as their brains tried to process the garbage data flooding their sensory organs. Half a second was more than enough. Marin closed the distance in 2 strides. The baton caught the first Valdrathi across the throat, not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to trigger the involuntary gag reflex that temporarily paralyzed his diaphragm. He doubled over, gasping. She used his falling body as a step, launching herself upward to drive her elbow into the second Valdrathi's temple with a sharp, clean strike that dropped her unconscious before she hit the ground. 3 down, 4 seconds. The formation was breaking apart. The remaining cadets had expected the fight to be over by now. They had expected to be standing over a defeated human, perhaps feeling slightly guilty about how easy it had been. Instead, 3 of their best were on the ground, and the human was moving through them like something out of a nightmare, small, fast, and hitting, with a precision that turned a rubber stick into something far more dangerous than claws. The 2 Kessna reacted on pure instinct. They had been waiting near the obstacles, coiled and ready, and now they launched themselves at Marin from opposite sides. Kessna ambush attacks were among the fastest strikes in the known galaxy. Their razor limbs could cross 3 meters in less than 1/10 of a second. Marin was already turning before they moved. She had watched the Kessna in yesterday's training session. She had memorized the way the muscles at the base of their rear limbs tensed before a lunge, that tiny telegraph, invisible to everyone else, that screamed at a human brain trained in pattern recognition. She saw the tension, read the trajectory, and moved. She dropped flat. Both Kessna sailed over her, their razor limbs cutting the air where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. They collided with each other mid-flight, a tangle of chitin and bladed limbs that sent them sprawling. Before either could recover, Marin rolled to her feet and struck the base of the nearest one's neural ridge, the exposed junction where the insected brain met the spinal column. The Kessna went limp. Her partner tried to rise and Marin's baton found the same spot with mechanical accuracy. Down. 5 down, 7 seconds. The 2 Grenath charged together, their 6 limbs churning, their skin already hardening to stone-like density. They were the tanks of the group, built to absorb punishment and keep coming. Marin didn't try to hit them. She ran directly between them, so close that their hardened limbs scraped her shoulders, and planted the baton against the floor behind her as she passed. The lead Grenath tripped over it at full sprint. At his speed and mass, the fall was catastrophic. He hit the ground face first and slid 4 meters, his stone-hardened skin grinding a trench in the arena floor. The second Grenath turned to track Marin, but turning was slow when your skin was rigid. Marin was behind him before he completed the rotation. She jumped, grabbed the ridge of hardened skin along his back, and used it to swing herself up and over. As she passed over his head, she drove both knees into the soft, unhardened tissue at the base of his skull. He dropped like a building. 7 down, 9 seconds. The two remaining Valdrathi tried to coordinate an attack, clicking desperately to each other. Marin didn't give them the chance. She threw the baton not at them but at the metal pillar behind them. It bounced off with a sharp crack that scrambled their echolocation with reflected noise. In the moment of confusion, she closed the distance on foot. An open palm strike to the first one's solar plexus folded him in half. She caught the baton on the rebound, spun, and drove it into the second one's balance organ behind the left ear. He staggered sideways and fell. 9 down, 10 seconds. The last Rithari cadet, a massive female with dark green scales, backed away, all 4 arms raised defensively. For the first time in her life, she was experiencing something her species had no evolutionary framework for. She was watching a creature half her size systematically dismantle the best fighters in the academy, and every predator instinct in her body was screaming a single word she had never associated with herself: run. Marin didn't give her the choice. She feinted left, watched the Rithari's eyes track the movement, then came from the right. 3 rapid strikes: throat, inner elbow joint, the nerve cluster under the second left arm, and the Rithari sat down hard, her body refusing the commands her brain was sending. 10 down, 11 seconds. Sirith was last. He had held back, watching, adapting, the mark of a truly excellent fighter. He had seen what Marin did to his teammates and he had adjusted. He didn't charge. He didn't lunge. He circled, all 4 arms ready, his body low, his eyes tracking her with the cold focus of a predator who finally understood he was fighting something dangerous. Marin circled with him. For 1 full second they moved in mirror image, the longest pause in the entire fight. Then Sirith struck. He was faster than any of the others, more precise, more creative. His upper arms swept in a high cross while his lower arms drove forward in a disemboweling thrust. It was a beautiful attack, perfectly executed. Marin stepped inside. Inside, where his reach became a cage around her, where his size was a prison instead of an advantage. His claw caught her left arm as she moved. A thin line of red opened along her forearm, but she was already past the point of caring about pain. She drove the baton upward into the nerve junction under his jaw, then spun it and struck twice more along his central spinal column. 3 impacts in less than half a second, each one landing on a spot she had identified yesterday from the gallery. Sirith's golden eyes went wide. His body locked. And then, like a great tree falling, he toppled forward and hit the arena floor with a sound that echoed through the silent gallery. 12 down, 11.3 seconds. Marin stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by 12 unconscious predator cadets, and breathed. Her biometric display read 88 beats per minute, elevated but controlled. A light sweat covered her face. A thin line of blood ran down her left forearm from where Sirith's claw had grazed her. The arena was completely silent. 2,000 beings from dozens of species sat in the gallery and said nothing. The silence was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a fundamental assumption being broken. The deep, stunned quiet that follows when the universe reveals it does not work the way you thought it did. Marin looked up at the instructor's gallery. She found Draken. He was gripping the railing with all 4 hands, his knuckles white beneath his scales. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She gave him a small, respectful nod, one professional to another. Then the combat AI finished its analysis. The results appeared on every screen in the arena. Total engagement time, 11.3 seconds. Injuries sustained by Challenger, 1 minor laceration. Injuries sustained by defenders, 0 permanent, 12 temporary incapacitations. Technique classification scrolled across the bottom of the screen in characters large enough for the entire gallery to read. It read, Adaptive Predator Loss Scenario Doctrine. Human origin. No equivalent in Galactic Combat Database. Draken read it 3 times. He understood every word individually. Together, they formed a concept that shook something deep inside his understanding of the galaxy. Predator Loss Scenario. The humans had built their entire fighting doctrine around one assumption, that they would always be the weaker thing in the fight. They had taken that assumption, that certainty of disadvantage, and forged it into something that had just put 12 apex predators on the floor in 11 seconds. Draken released the railing and sat down heavily in his chair. Below, Marin Holt tucked the rubber baton into her belt and walked calmly toward the medical team, not for herself, but to check on the cadets she had dropped. The medical bay was quiet except for the low hum of healing pods and the occasional groan of a cadet waking up to discover that the worst thing about the fight wasn't the loss, it was the speed of it. 12 pods lined the walls, each one containing a predator cadet whose body was being scanned, treated, and restored by technology that could mend broken bones in hours. None of them had broken bones. That was the part that disturbed the medical staff the most. Every single strike Marin had delivered was calibrated to incapacitate without causing lasting damage. She had hit nerve clusters, balance organs, pressure points, and reflex centers with the kind of precision that required not just knowing where to strike, but knowing exactly how hard. Too soft and the target stays up. Too hard and you cause permanent injury. She had threaded the needle 12 times in 11 seconds without a single error. The head medic, a Valdrathi surgeon with 30 years of combat trauma experience, reviewed the scan results and then looked at Marin, who was sitting on a bench nearby getting her forearm treated for the single cut Cirith had given her. "You could have killed them," the surgeon said quietly. Marin didn't look up. Yes. Every strike, any one of them, delivered with a few more pounds of force, in some cases a few centimeters in a different direction, would have been lethal. "I know." The surgeon studied her for a long moment, then went back to his work without another word. There was nothing else to say. Footage of the fight was classified within an hour of its conclusion. Draken personally sealed the arena recordings under military security protocols, which meant absolutely nothing. The fight had been witnessed by over 2,000 beings, and in the age of personal recording devices and galactic communication networks, the video was everywhere before dinner. Within 6 hours, military analysts from 14 coalition species had requested official copies. Within 12 hours, the phrase Predator Loss Scenario Doctrine was trending on every major information network in the coalition. Draken sat in his office that evening, staring at the wall and thinking about everything he thought he knew about humans. His office was lined with trophies from a lifetime of combat, weapons taken from defeated opponents, medals from campaigns fought across a dozen worlds, holographic recordings of his greatest victories. He had earned every one of them through strength, speed, and the predatory superiority that defined his species. He had built his career, his identity, and his understanding of warfare on a single principle: the strong survive. A human with a rubber stick had just made that principle look like a children's story. He summoned Marin the next morning. She arrived promptly, the thin bandage on her forearm the only visible reminder of yesterday's events. She stood in front of his desk, standing, because the chairs in his office were built for Rithari, and she would have looked ridiculous trying to climb into one, and waited. "Explain it to me," Draken said. "No preamble, no formality. Explain what you did." Marin took a breath. "How much do you know about Earth?" "It is a mid-range terrestrial world. Temperate climate, moderate gravity. Your species evolved there approximately 300,000 years ago." "All correct, but there's something the Coalition files leave out or maybe don't understand. Earth wasn't a gentle place, sir. When humans were evolving, our planet was full of predators. Big cats that could run twice our speed, bears that outweighed us by a factor of 10, wolves that hunted in coordinated packs, crocodiles, sharks, venomous snakes, birds of prey. We shared our world with hundreds of species that were faster, stronger, better armed, and better armored than us. And yet you survived. We did more than survive. We became the dominant species on the planet. We did it without claws, without venom, without natural armor, without echolocation, without any of the advantages that your cadets take for granted. We did it with this. She tapped the side of her head. Pattern recognition, predictive modeling, the ability to watch something happen once and build a mental model of how it will happen again. Every human combat system ever developed, and we have developed hundreds, is built on the same foundation. We don't fight what's in front of us. We fight what's about to happen. Draken leaned forward, his forearms resting on the desk. My cadets are trained warriors. They are not mindless predators relying on instinct. No, they're not. They're smart, disciplined, and skilled. But their training is built on the assumption that they are the most dangerous thing in the room. Every technique they learn starts from a position of superiority, overwhelm, overpower, dominate. It works beautifully against other predators because both sides are playing the same game. She paused. They have never fought something that enters the room already knowing it's the weakest thing there. And that changes things. It changes everything. Your cadets fight to win. Humans fight to survive. A predator that loses a fight goes hungry. Maybe it gets injured, it walks away and tries again tomorrow. A human that loses a fight dies. There is no tomorrow. That changes the math. It changes how we see movement, how we read body language, how we calculate risk. When losing means death, you develop a very different relationship with combat. Draken was silent for a long time. His golden eyes were fixed on Marin with an intensity that would have made most beings uncomfortable. She met his gaze steadily. In the arena, he said slowly, you knew what they were going to do before they did it. I knew what they were likely to do. I spent the previous day watching them train. I cataloged their movement patterns, their pre-attack tells, their preferred techniques, their physical habits. Cirith favors his right rear leg, did you know that? The lead Kessna tenses her rear limb muscles 60 milliseconds before she launches. The Valdrathi pairs always coordinate with their alpha on the left. None of that is secret information. It's all visible. You just have to know how to read it. And humans can read it. Humans can't stop reading it. Our brains are wired to detect patterns, especially patterns that might indicate danger. On Earth, the humans who couldn't read a predator's body language died young. The ones who could read it lived long enough to have children. 300,000 years of that, and you get a species that walks into a room and automatically catalogs every potential threat, every possible exit, and every physical weakness of everything present, usually before we're consciously aware we're doing it. Draken considered this. Then he asked the question that had kept him awake. You used non-lethal force. Every strike was controlled, precise. You could have killed any of them. Yes. Why didn't you? Marin looked at him with something that was almost surprise, as if the answer were so obvious she hadn't expected the question. They're students, sir. They needed a lesson, not a funeral. The words hung in the air between them. Draken turned them over in his mind and found something in them that he hadn't expected, not just restraint, but a kind of respect. She had fought his cadets with everything she had and simultaneously protected them from the full consequences of the mismatch. She had beaten them completely while ensuring they walked away with nothing worse than bruised pride and sore muscles. It was, he realized, the most predatory thing he had ever seen, not the violence, the control. He dismissed her with a nod, and Marin walked out of his office and into the corridor. She made it about 20 meters before a shadow detached itself from the wall and blocked her path. Cirith. He was fully recovered, physically at least. The healing pod had erased every trace of the fight from his body, but his eyes told a different story. They were tight, hot, conflicted, the eyes of someone whose understanding of themselves had been broken and not yet rebuilt. How, he said, just the one word pressed through clenched teeth. Marin looked up at him. He was nearly 3 feet taller than her, 400 pounds heavier, armed with claws that could cut through steel. Yesterday, she had put him on the floor in front of 2,000 witnesses. "How what?" she asked, not unkindly. "How did a prey species beat me?" The corridor was empty. Their voices echoed faintly off the metal walls. Marin studied Cirith for a long moment, not the way she had studied him in the arena, cataloging weaknesses, but something different. She was reading something else now. His posture, his tone, the tension in his jaw, she was reading whether this was anger or something more useful. She decided it was something more useful. "First," she said quietly, "we were never prey. We just let the galaxy think we were. It's easier that way. People underestimate you, leave you alone, give you time to watch and learn. Humans have been doing that since before we left Earth." Cirith's scales rippled, an involuntary Rithari expression of deep discomfort. "Second," Marin continued, "I didn't beat you because I'm better than you. I beat you because you didn't know what I was. You walked into that arena thinking you were fighting a weaker species. You planned for prey. You got something else." "And what is that?" Marin tilted her head, a gesture she had unconsciously picked up from the Rithari, though on her it looked different. It looked like a predator deciding whether to show its teeth. "Something the galaxy hasn't figured out yet," she said. "Humans aren't predators who lost their claws. We're prey that figured out how to win. That's not the same thing. A predator fights because it's confident. A human fights because it's terrified, and terror makes you creative in ways that confidence never will." She stepped around him and continued down the corridor. Cirith stood there for a long time, his 4 arms hanging at his sides, his mind working through something that had no equivalent in Rithari philosophy. That evening, he went to her quarters. He stood outside for several minutes before pressing the chime. When Marin opened the door, she found him standing in the corridor with his arms folded and his head slightly bowed, a Rithari posture that she recognized from the cultural database. It was the way a student presented themselves to a teacher. "I want you to teach me," he said. "Not predator doctrine, yours. I want to learn how to fight when I'm the weakest thing in the room." Marin leaned against the doorframe and looked up at him. A Rithari cadet, the best fighter in the academy, a born apex predator from a species that had conquered star systems, was asking a human to teach him how to be afraid. She studied him for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "We start tomorrow." 3 months changed everything. It started with Cirith and grew like a crack in a dam. Within the first week, 4 more cadets approached Marin quietly after hours when the corridors were empty and no one would see a predator species asking a human for help. By the end of the second week, the number was 14. By the end of the first month, it was 36, and the sessions had moved from Marin's cramped quarters to a dedicated training hall that Draken had authorized without being asked. He had simply sent her the room assignment one morning, along with a single line of text: "Carry on, Corporal." Marin didn't teach them to fight like humans. That would have been pointless. A Rithari trying to move like a human was like a battleship trying to move like a speedboat. Instead, she taught them to think like humans. She taught them to enter a room and automatically identify every threat, every exit, and every weakness, including their own. She taught them to read body language across species lines, to detect the micro-expressions and muscle tensions that telegraphed an attack before it launched. She taught them to plan for failure, to assume that the first plan wouldn't work and have 3 more ready. She taught them to fight scared. That last part was the hardest. Predator species had spent millions of years evolving away from fear. Their brains were wired to process threat as excitement, not danger. Teaching them to embrace the possibility of losing, to use it as fuel rather than reject it as weakness, required Marin to dismantle assumptions so deep they were almost biological. She did it through sparring. Endless sparring, but with rules that inverted everything the cadets knew. She would assign them opponents they couldn't beat, 3 against 1. or facing a species with natural advantages they couldn't match, and then watch how they adapted. At first, they didn't. They charged in with predator confidence and got overwhelmed. They did it again and got the same result. And again. And then slowly, something began to change. They started watching, started reading, started moving differently, not with the explosive aggression of apex predators, but with the watchful, adaptive fluidity of something that knew it was outmatched and chose to fight anyway. Cirith changed the most. The arrogant young cadet who had laughed at Marin's size on the first day was gone. In his place was something quieter and considerably more dangerous. He moved through the academy with a stillness that unsettled his fellow cadets, not the stillness of a predator waiting to strike, but the stillness of something constantly processing, constantly reading, constantly preparing for a fight it expected to lose. His breakthrough came 6 weeks in. He was sparring against a visiting Rithari officer, a lieutenant commander with twice his experience and 30 kilograms more muscle. Traditional doctrine said Cirith should have lost. The officer was bigger, stronger, more experienced, and fighting with the confidence of someone who had never been beaten by a cadet. Cirith fought him the way Marin had fought in the arena. He didn't match strength with strength. He read the officer's patterns, anticipated his combinations, positioned himself where the officer's size became a liability. He fought from the inside, from the angles, from the spaces between the officer's assumptions. He won in 40 seconds without taking a single clean hit. The officer sat on the arena floor, breathing hard, 4 arms limp at his sides, and asked what doctrine the cadet had been trained in. Cirith looked up at the gallery, where Marin was watching. "Human," he said. Draken watched all of this with the complex emotions of a man seeing his life's work simultaneously validated and made obsolete. His predator training program was still the backbone of the academy, but Marin's methods were becoming the edge that separated good fighters from exceptional ones. He found himself spending more time in her training sessions than his own, standing in the back of the room with his 4 arms crossed, saying nothing, watching everything. He never admitted that he was learning too, but Marin noticed the way he started reading rooms differently, the way his eyes would sweep a space when he entered it, cataloging exits and threats with a pattern she recognized intimately. Old predators could learn new tricks, it seemed. They just preferred to do it silently. The crisis arrived without warning, as real crises always do. A distress signal reached Crucible Prime at 0300 on a Tuesday morning. A coalition mining outpost on the nearby moon of Valdrathi 4 had been seized by Gorath raiders, a species so consistently violent that they had been expelled from the coalition decades ago. The Gorath were large, brutal, and utterly fearless, with a combat culture that valued destruction over strategy. They had taken 47 hostages, including a dozen civilian children, and were demanding ransom in the form of military-grade weapons and a ship capable of reaching deep space. The nearest coalition rapid response fleet was 9 hours away. The outpost's life support would fail in 6. The hostages had no time. Draken convened an emergency meeting in the command center. The situation was straightforward and terrible. Someone had to go in now, with whatever was available, or 47 people would die. The academy had combat-trained cadets and a single-armed shuttle. What it did not have was a plan that didn't end in a bloodbath. The Gorath were holding the hostages in the outpost's central atrium, an open space with limited cover and multiple elevated positions from which the raiders could fire on anyone entering. Standard predator assault doctrine would involve breaching the doors and overwhelming the defenders with speed and aggression. Against Gorath, who were nearly as large as Rithari and considerably less concerned about self-preservation, that approach would result in catastrophic casualties on both sides and almost certainly get the hostages killed. Marin spoke up in the meeting. "Let me take a team, volunteers only, and let me do it my way." Draken looked at her for a long time, Every regulation in the book said no. She was a visiting instructor, not a field commander. The cadets were students, not soldiers. The liability alone could end his career. He said yes. 12 cadets volunteered within minutes, the same number as the arena fight, though this time the symmetry was coincidence. Cirith was first. The others followed, a mix of species, all trained in Marin's doctrine, all understanding exactly what they were walking into. On the shuttle to Valdrathi 4, Marin briefed them. She didn't give them a rigid plan. She gave them a framework, entry points, communication protocols, target priorities, and a single overriding instruction. Read the room, adapt to what you find, and protect the hostages above everything else, including yourselves. The Gorath are predators, she told them. They expect predators. They're prepared for something big and loud and aggressive to come through those doors. So we're not going to be big or loud or aggressive. We're going to be quiet, fast, and everywhere at once. We're going to hit them from angles they don't expect in ways they can't predict, and we're going to do it without killing anyone. These are criminals, not soldiers. They don't deserve to die for being stupid. Cirith, checking his equipment beside her, caught her eye. He understood. She was doing it again, choosing precision over violence, control over destruction. The hardest path because it was the right one. The operation took 4 minutes and 12 seconds. They entered through 6 different access points simultaneously. The Gorath, expecting a frontal assault, had fortified the main entrance and were pointing every weapon they had at the front doors. When the cadets came through the ventilation shafts, the maintenance tunnels, and the emergency airlocks, the raiders found themselves surrounded by enemies they hadn't seen coming, moving with a coordination that blended predator strength with human adaptability. Cirith personally subdued 3 Gorath twice his age, using techniques that would have been unrecognizable to any standard military handbook. He didn't overpower them. He outmaneuvered them, using the confined space of the atrium corridors to neutralize their size advantage, striking with controlled precision at joints and nerve clusters that Marin had taught him to identify on 7 different species. Each one went down without permanent injury. Each one stayed down. The hostages were freed without a single casualty on either side. 47 people, including 12 children, walked out of that outpost alive, because a group of predator cadets had learned to fight like the weakest thing in the room. The coalition admiral who debriefed the operation was a Valdrathi named Kessna. She had served for 40 years and thought she had seen everything combat doctrine had to offer. She sat in the command center on Crucible Prime, reviewed the operation footage 3 times, and then turned to Draken with a single question. What training doctrine did those cadets use? Draken stood straight, all 4 arms clasped behind his back. He did not hesitate. Human, he said. 2 weeks later, the Academy held a formal ceremony in its great hall, a vaulted chamber large enough to hold the entire student body and staff. Marin was appointed to a newly created position, Doctrine Advisor, permanent faculty, with the authority to integrate human combat philosophy into the Academy's core curriculum. It was the first time in the Academy's 300-year history that a non-predator species had been given a permanent training role. When Marin entered the hall, every cadet in the room stood, not because they were ordered to, not because protocol demanded it. They stood because 3 months ago, a small woman with a rubber stick had walked into an arena full of the galaxy's deadliest fighters and shown them that everything they believed about strength was incomplete. Marin accepted the appointment with a short nod and no speech. She was not a person who needed the galaxy to hear her talk. She had already said everything that mattered, and she had said it in 11 seconds. After the ceremony, she found herself on the observation deck overlooking the stars. The station rotated slowly, and the galaxy turned below like a river of light. She stood at the railing, alone, and allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Footsteps behind her, heavy, deliberate, but quieter than they used to be. Cirith joined her at the railing. He was bigger than her by every measure the galaxy used to define power. He stood beside her and looked out at the same stars, at the endless dark filled with civilizations, empires, predators, and prey. "I've been wanting to ask you something," he said, "since the arena." "Go ahead." "That first fight, the 12 of us, were you ever afraid?" Marin didn't answer right away. She looked out at the stars and thought about the question with the honest consideration it deserved. She thought about the moment the signal had sounded and 12 apex predators had started moving toward her. She thought about the Kessna launching from ambush, the Valdrathi closing in from the flanks, Cirith's claw opening the skin of her arm. She thought about the rubber baton in her hand, and the simple, undeniable mathematics of a 60-kilogram human facing 1,200 kilograms of evolved killing power. "Every second," she said. Cirith turned to look at her. "Every second." "Every single one. My heart rate said 62, but that's just training. Inside, I was terrified. I have been terrified in every fight I've ever been in. Every human who has ever fought anything has been terrified." "Then how do you function? How do you move, think, fight if you're afraid?" Marin smiled, a small, tired, honest smile that made her look, for a moment, very human and very old. "That's the part you still don't understand," she said. "The fear is the point. It's what keeps us reading the room, adjusting, adapting, looking for the next threat before it arrives. Take away the fear and we're just another predator, strong or fast or tough but predictable. Keep the fear, let it run through everything we do, and there's nothing in the galaxy we can't survive." Cirith stood with that for a long time. The station turned. The stars moved. He thought about his training, about the doctrine of predators, the philosophy of strength, dominance, and superiority that had shaped every warrior his species had ever produced. It had served them well. It had built an empire. But it had a ceiling, and he had found that ceiling in an arena on a Tuesday afternoon, when a woman a third his size had shown him exactly where it was. He looked out at the galaxy. Billions of stars, countless species, ancient empires and powers that could shatter worlds, predators and prey and everything in between, scattered across a universe that did not care about any of them. And for the first time, standing beside a small, quiet human on an observation deck in the middle of nowhere, Cirith was not afraid of any of it. Not because he was stronger than what was out there. Because someone had taught him that the most dangerous thing in any room was not the biggest, not the fastest, not the one with the sharpest claws or the most powerful weapons. It was the one that already knew it was going to lose and fought anyway.